The morning sun pierced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the modern high-rise apartment in downtown Denver, casting long shadows across the granite countertops where Delaney Whitaker stood, methodically preparing lunchboxes. Her daughter Skylar's volleyball practice would run late today, and Barrett would likely be caught up in meetings again. Even after 15 years of marriage, she maintained these small acts of care, despite the growing distance she felt from her husband. At 42, Delaney carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had weathered storms without letting them dim her light. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her business attire spoke of the successful real estate agent she had become. It hadn't always been this way. 3 years ago, their lives had taken an unexpected turn when Barrett lost his position as a financial analyst during a company-wide restructuring. The memory of that night still felt fresh. Barrett sitting at this very counter, his usually confident demeanor shattered, telling her he wanted to start his own business consulting firm. "I can't go back to working for someone else, Delaney. This is my chance to build something of my own." His eyes had held such determination that she couldn't help but believe in his vision, even as their savings account dwindled and the bills piled up. While Barrett threw himself into building his dream, Delaney shouldered the burden of keeping their family afloat. She doubled her real estate showings, often working weekends and evenings, while maintaining the illusion of normalcy for Skylar. The 12-year-old was perceptive enough to sense the tension, but trusted her mother's reassurances that everything would be fine. "Mom, have you seen my blue scrunchie?" Skylar's voice echoed from upstairs, pulling Delaney from her reverie. She smiled, recognizing the hint of adolescent urgency in her daughter's tone. "Check the bathroom drawer, honey. I put it there yesterday," Delaney called back, slipping an encouraging note into Skylar's lunch bag. These small gestures had become more important than ever, as their family dynamics shifted under the weight of Barrett's ambitions. The sound of heels clicking against hardwood announced Eleanor Callahan's arrival before she appeared in the doorway. Barrett's mother had a key to their apartment, a fact that Delaney had learned to tolerate rather than appreciate. Eleanor's perfectly coiffed silver hair and designer outfit were as much a part of her morning visits as her thinly veiled criticisms. "Delaney, dear," Eleanor's voice carried its usual mix of sweetness and steel, "I thought I'd stop by to check on things. Barrett mentioned he's been so busy lately." She glanced around the kitchen, her practiced eye catching details to critique. "Those windows could use a good cleaning. The morning light makes the smudges so obvious." Delaney took a deep breath, maintaining her composure as she had countless times before. "Good morning, Eleanor. Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." She gestured to the expensive coffee maker, a gift from Eleanor last Christmas, accompanied by a lengthy explanation of how their old one wasn't suitable for a family of their standing. "No, thank you. I can't stay long. I just wanted to remind you about the country club benefit this weekend. The Carmichaels will be there, and you know how important their connections could be for Barrett's business." Eleanor's tone suggested this was non-negotiable, despite Delaney having 3 property showings scheduled for Saturday. The mention of the Carmichaels sparked a familiar tension in Delaney's shoulders. The prestigious family had been Eleanor's not-so-subtle example of proper connections for years, even before Barrett's career change. Now, with his consulting firm finally gaining traction, Eleanor's networking attempts had become more aggressive. "I'll check our schedule," Delaney replied diplomatically, knowing full well she would have to rearrange her entire weekend to accommodate this latest social obligation. The commissions from those showings would have to wait. Skylar bounded down the stairs, her dark hair now perfectly secured with the found scrunchie. She was the perfect blend of her parents. Barrett's height and Delaney's delicate features, combined with a confidence that was entirely her own. "Hi, Grandma," she called out, grabbing a banana from the fruit bowl. Eleanor's expression softened marginally. "Skylar, darling, that uniform skirt looks a bit short. Delaney, perhaps it's time to order new ones. The Bradford Academy has certain standards to maintain." Delaney felt her daughter stiffen beside her. The private school's tuition was already a stretch, even with Eleanor's contribution, which she never failed to mention at family gatherings. Before Delaney could respond, Barrett appeared in the kitchen, his presence filling the space with a different kind of tension. He kissed Delaney's cheek quickly, more habit than affection, before greeting his mother. "Mom, I didn't expect you this morning. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, dear. I was just reminding Delaney about the benefit. The Carmichaels specifically asked if you'd be attending. Eleanor beamed at her son, her pride evident in every word. Barrett glanced at Delaney, a flicker of understanding crossing his face before he defaulted to his usual diplomatic stance. "We'll try to make it work," he said, not committing either way. As the morning routine continued around her, Delaney felt the familiar weight of unspoken words pressing against her chest. The sacrifices she had made, the long hours she had worked, the criticism she had endured, all of it had helped Barrett rebuild his life and career. Yet standing in their expensive apartment, watching him navigate between his mother's expectations and their marriage, she wondered if the price of success might be higher than either of them had anticipated. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Delaney's desk at Mile High Reality as she stared at her computer screen, trying to focus on the property listings before her. The morning's interaction with Eleanor had left her more unsettled than usual, and Barrett's passive response still echoed in her mind. Her phone buzzed with a text from Caroline Winters, her closest friend and fellow agent, asking about lunch. 20 minutes later, they sat at their favorite cafe near the office, the busy lunch crowd providing a comfortable blanket of anonymity. Caroline, with her trademark red lipstick and sharp wit, had been Delaney's confidant since they'd started at the agency together 7 years ago. "So, Eleanor made another surprise visit?" Caroline raised an eyebrow, stirring her iced tea. "That woman has elevated passive-aggressive behavior to an art form." Delaney pushed her salad around the plate. "It's not just Eleanor, it's everything. Barrett's finally seeing success with his consulting firm, but it feels like we're growing further apart. This morning he barely looked at me when Mom brought up the benefit. The same benefit you have 3 showings scheduled for?" Caroline frowned. "Del, you can't keep rearranging your life around Eleanor's social calendar. Those listings could lead to substantial commissions." "I know," Delaney sighed, "but Barrett needs the Carmichaels' connections. Their influence in Denver's business community is incredible, and Eleanor never fails to remind me how their support could be transformative for Barrett's firm." Caroline leaned forward, her expression serious. "Remember when Barrett lost his job? Who kept this family afloat? Who handled the mortgage payments while he chased his dreams? You did. And now that he's successful, you're still the one making all the sacrifices." The truth in Caroline's words stung. During those difficult months, Delaney had thrown herself into her work, often showing properties until late in the evening. She'd attended every one of Skylar's volleyball games, helped with homework and maintained their home, all while Barrett worked endless hours in their home office, building his business from scratch. "I believed in him, Caroline. I still do. But sometimes..." Delaney's voice trailed off as her phone buzzed with a text from Skylar. "Mom, can you pick me up early? Not feeling great." "Duty calls?" Caroline asked, recognizing the concern in her friend's eyes. "Skylar's not feeling well. I should get her from school." Delaney gathered her things, already mentally rearranging her afternoon appointments. Back at Bradford Academy, Delaney found Skylar sitting in the nurse's office, her usual vibrancy dimmed. "Just a headache," Skylar assured her, but Delaney sensed there was more to the story. In the car, as they navigated through Denver's afternoon traffic, Skylar finally spoke. "Mom, is Dad going to be at my volleyball game tomorrow?" Delaney's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Barrett had missed the last 3 games, each time with a legitimate business reason. "He's trying to make it, sweetie. His schedule is pretty packed right now." "Grandma Eleanor says his business is really important," Skylar said, her tone carefully neutral. "She says we should be proud of how hard he works." The familiar anger bubbled up in Delaney's chest. Eleanor's influence seemed to seep into every aspect of their lives, even their daughter's understanding of family priorities. "Your father is building something important," Delaney agreed carefully, "but you're important too. We're all important." At home, as Skylar retreated to her room to rest, Delaney found herself standing in Barrett's home office. The space had evolved from a makeshift workspace to a sophisticated setup, complete with multiple monitors and the latest technology. Evidence of his success surrounded her. Industry awards, framed articles about his consulting firm, photos of him with prominent business leaders. Her eyes landed on a picture from their early days of marriage, Barrett and Delaney on a camping trip in the Rockies, their faces flushed with youth and adventure. She remembered how they used to dream together, planning their future over cheap wine in their first apartment. When had they stopped sharing dreams? When had his success become the only dream that mattered? The sound of the front door opening announced Barrett's early return. He appeared in the office doorway, his expression questioning. "Everything okay?" "I got your text about Skylar. She has a headache," Delaney replied, still holding the camping photo. "Barrett, we need to talk about tomorrow's game. She really wants you there." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized as prelude to disappointment. "Del, you know I have that meeting with the Carmichaels tomorrow. Mom arranged it weeks ago. It could mean a major contract for the firm. Your daughter has a championship game, Barrett. She's 12 and she needs her father there. I'm doing this for her future, for our future," he countered, his voice taking on the defensive tone she'd grown to hate. "Mom understands that. Why can't you?" The mention of Eleanor ignited something in Delaney. "Your mother understands. Your mother has been undermining me since the day we got married. She criticizes how I run our home, how I raise our daughter, how I support your career, and you just stand there silent." Barrett's face hardened. "That's not fair. Mom has helped us in countless ways. Her connections, her support during the startup phase." "What about my support?" Delaney interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. "Who was there when you lost your job? Who worked extra hours to pay our bills? Who defended your dreams to my family when they said you were being irresponsible?" The silence that followed was deafening. Through the open door, they could hear Skylar's music playing faintly upstairs, a reminder of what was at stake in this conversation. Barrett moved to his desk, his back to Delaney, his shoulders tense. "I have to take this call with the Tokyo office in 10 minutes. Can we discuss this later?" Delaney placed the camping photo face down on his desk. "Later. It's always later with you, Barrett, but our daughter is growing up now and later might be too late." The country club benefit arrived with all the pomp Eleanor had promised. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over Denver's elite as they mingled around elegant table settings, their conversations a careful dance of business and pleasure. Delaney stood near the bar, her emerald cocktail dress, carefully selected to meet Eleanor's exacting standards, feeling more like armor than evening wear. "Mrs. Whitaker, you look lovely." Richard Carmichael's wife, Victoria, approached with the practiced grace of old money. "Eleanor has told us so much about your family." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she glanced at Delaney's empty hands. "No Barrett tonight? He's running a bit late," Delaney replied smoothly, though she knew Barrett was still at Skylar's volleyball game, a small victory she'd won after their argument. The compromise, he'd make an appearance at both events, trying to please everyone as usual. Across the room, Eleanor held court with a group of society women, her silver hair catching the light as she gestured animatedly. Delaney could almost predict the conversation, another carefully curated story about Barrett's success, with convenient omissions of the struggles and sacrifices that had paved the way. Caroline's words from their lunch echoed in her mind as she watched Eleanor work the room. Her friend had been right about the sacrifices, about the constant rearranging of her life to accommodate others' expectations. The 3 property showings she'd cancelled for this event represented more than just lost commissions. They represented her own dreams and professional goals, continuously pushed aside. "Delaney!" Eleanor's voice cut through her thoughts. "Come here, darling. Mrs. Carmichael was just asking about that charming little house you showed her niece." The way Eleanor said "little house" made it sound like a quaint hobby rather than Delaney's successful career. She navigated through the crowd, plastering on her best real estate agent smile when her phone buzzed. A text from Barrett made her heart sink. "Skylar took a bad fall during the game, taking her to urgent care. Nothing serious, but she's pretty shaken up." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Skylar was hurt and she was here, playing social politics with people who saw her family as mere stepping stones to their own success. Before she could make her excuses, Eleanor appeared at her side, gripping her arm with manicured fingers. "The Carmichaels are ready to discuss Barrett's proposal," Eleanor whispered urgently. "Richard specifically asked for both of you to be present. Where is Barrett? He should have been here by now." "Skylar's hurt," Delaney said, her voice tight. "Barrett's taking her to urgent care." Eleanor's face darkened. Surely the school nurse could handle a minor injury. "This meeting is crucial for Barrett's future. The Carmichaels don't offer private audiences to just anyone." Something snapped inside Delaney. Years of accumulated frustration, of swallowed replies and diplomatic smiles, burst through her carefully maintained composure. "My daughter is hurt," she said, each word clear and sharp. "She's more important than any business deal." "Now, Delaney," Eleanor began, her tone dripping with condescension, "you're being emotional. This is exactly why I worried about Barrett marrying someone who didn't understand our world. In families like ours, Delaney interrupted, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention from nearby guests. "You mean families where mothers criticize their daughters-in-law for working while their sons pursue their dreams? Where grandmothers try to dictate every aspect of their grandchildren's lives? Where wives are expected to sacrifice everything for their husband's success?" Eleanor's face flushed. "I have only ever wanted what's best for Barrett and Skylar. Everything I've done has been about control," Delaney finished. "You've never accepted me, Eleanor. Never accepted that Barrett chose someone who didn't fit your social mold, and now you're trying to mold Skylar into your image of a proper society daughter." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Victoria Carmichael and her companions had drifted away, pretending not to notice the confrontation, while undoubtedly cataloguing every word for future gossip. Eleanor stood rigid, her perfectly composed facade cracking slightly. "I'm leaving," Delaney announced, gathering her clutch. "My daughter needs me. And for once, I'm not going to apologize for putting my family first. My real family, not your social connections." As she strode toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble floor, Delaney felt lighter than she had in years. The carefully constructed image of the perfect daughter-in-law had shattered, and in its place stood something stronger, a woman who had finally found her voice. In the parking lot, she pulled out her phone to call Barrett, but paused. There would be consequences for her outburst, ripples that would affect their carefully balanced life. Eleanor would never forgive such a public display, and Barrett would be caught in the middle once again. But as she thought of Skylar waiting at the urgent care, possibly scared and in pain, Delaney knew she had made the right choice. The urgent care center's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Skylar's pale face as Delaney rushed through the automatic doors. She found them in a quiet examination room, Skylar perched on the edge of an exam table, Barrett holding an ice pack to their daughter's ankle. The sight of them together, vulnerability replacing their usual careful poses, made Delaney's heart ache. "Mom!" Skylar's face brightened, then fell. "I'm sorry about the benefit. Dad said it was really important." "You're more important," Delaney said firmly, moving to embrace her daughter. Over Skylar's shoulder, she met Barrett's eyes, seeing questions there that would need answers soon enough. "Just a mild sprain," Barrett explained, his voice carrying a mix of relief and something else. Uncertainty, perhaps. "The doctor wants her to rest it for a few days." He paused, studying Delaney's evening dress. "How did the meeting with the Carmichaels go?" "I left early," she replied simply, focusing on Skylar's ankle. "Caroline's going to bring over some client files later. I can work from home tomorrow, stay with Skylar." The ride home was quiet, filled with the kind of silence that comes before significant changes. Skylar dozed in the back seat, the pain medication making her drowsy. Barrett drove with one hand on the wheel, the other tapping an irregular rhythm on his thigh, a nervous habit from their dating days that rarely surfaced anymore. Once Skylar was settled in bed, Barrett followed Delaney to the kitchen. The granite countertops gleamed in the dim light, the same countertops Eleanor had insisted they install during the renovation. Everything in their home seemed to carry her influence, right down to the expensive coffee maker that had replaced their beloved old one. "Your mother called," Barrett said finally, leaning against the counter. "She was upset." Delaney began loading the dishwasher, needing something to do with her hands. "I imagine she was. Del, the Carmichaels are important clients. What happened tonight was a long time coming." Delaney straightened, facing her husband. "Do you remember when we first moved to Denver? We used to talk about our dreams, both of our dreams. Somewhere along the way it became all about your dreams, your mother's expectations, your success." Barrett ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made her heart hurt. "I've been trying to build something for us for our future. Mom's connections have come with strings attached. Every favor, every introduction, every social event has been another opportunity for her to remind me that I'm not good enough for her son." The words tumbled out, years of suppressed feelings finding their voice. "And you've never stood up for me, Barrett. Not once." "That's not fair," he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "I've always supported you. Support isn't just about letting me work or staying quiet when your mother criticizes me. It's about being a partner, about defending our choices as a couple." Delaney moved to the window, looking out at the Denver skyline. "Do you know what Skylar asked me the other day? She asked if your business was more important than her volleyball games because that's what Eleanor told her." Barrett's sharp intake of breath told her the words had hit home. "She said that to Skylar. She says a lot of things to Skylar, about proper behavior, about social expectations, about how I work too much." Delaney turned back to him. "Our daughter is growing up thinking that her value is measured by how well she fits into your mother's world." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and missed opportunities. Finally, Barrett spoke, his voice quiet. "I never wanted this for us. When I lost my job, you were the only one who believed in me without conditions. Mom helped with connections, yes, but you held everything together." "Then why haven't you ever told her that?" Delaney asked softly. "Why do you let her treat me like an outsider in my own family?" Before Barrett could answer, Delaney's phone buzzed. A text from Caroline. "Eleanor's on the warpath. The Carmichaels left right after you did. Victoria's already spreading rumors. Call me." Barrett read the message over her shoulder, his face tightening. "I'll talk to Mom," he said finally. "This has gone too far." "It went too far years ago," Delaney replied. "The question is, what are we going to do about it now?" From upstairs came the sound of Skylar's music, soft and melancholic, their daughter caught between two worlds, her grandmother's rigid expectations and her parents' increasingly fragile marriage. Something had to change, but change meant confrontation, meant possibly losing the business connections that had become so central to Barrett's success. "I need some air," Barrett said suddenly, moving toward the door. I need to think." Delaney watched him go, remembering another night years ago when he'd walked out to think, the night he lost his job. She'd waited up for him then, ready to face whatever came next together. Now standing in their expensive kitchen with its Eleanor-approved appliances, she wondered if they still knew how to face things together at all. Morning light filtered through the windows of Delaney's home office, where she sat reviewing property listings on her laptop. Skylar's soft snores drifted from the living room couch, where she'd fallen asleep watching TV, her injured ankle propped up on a pillow. Barrett hadn't returned until late the previous night, and they'd barely exchanged words before he left early for the office, tension still thick between them. Her phone buzzed with a message from Caroline. "Turn on Channel 7 News, now." With trembling fingers, Delaney reached for the remote. The local morning news was running a business segment, and there was Barrett's face, standing beside Richard Carmichael. The caption read, "Denver business leaders announce revolutionary partnership." Despite recent social complications, Richard was saying, his practiced smile never wavering, "Whitaker Consulting has demonstrated exactly the kind of innovative thinking we value at Carmichael Industries. This partnership represents a new chapter for both our companies." The camera panned to Barrett, who looked simultaneously triumphant and exhausted. "We're excited about this opportunity to work with the Carmichael team. This partnership has been in development for some time, and we're grateful for the trust they've placed in our vision." Delaney's phone rang. Caroline. "Did you see it?" her friend demanded without preamble. "After everything that happened at the benefit, they're still moving forward with the deal." "Barrett never mentioned this was happening today," Delaney replied, her voice hollow. "He must have arranged it after you stood up to the Dragon Lady. Del, this is classic Eleanor manipulation. She's showing you that nothing you do can affect her plans for Barrett's future." A soft sound made Delaney turn. Skylar stood in the doorway, her crutches tucked under her arms. "Mom, was that Dad on TV?" "Yes, sweetie. Your father's company just made a big deal." Delaney forced a smile. "Caroline, I'll call you back." Skylar hobbled to the couch, her face thoughtful. "Grandma Eleanor called this morning while you were in the shower. She said she's taking me shopping this weekend to get my mind off my injury. She said..." Skylar hesitated, picking at a thread on her pajama sleeve. "She said I should be proud of Dad for putting family first, even when others try to make things difficult." The words hit Delaney like a physical blow. Eleanor was already spinning the narrative, using Skylar as a pawn in her games. "Honey, about what Grandma said, it's okay, Mom. Skylar's voice carried a maturity that made Delaney's heart ache. "I heard you and Dad talking last night, and I remember how hard you worked when Dad was starting his business. You never missed any of my games, even when you were super tired." Delaney moved to sit beside her daughter, careful of the injured ankle. "Sometimes adults make things more complicated than they need to be. Your dad and I, we both love you very much. That never changes, no matter what else is happening." "I know." Skylar leaned against her mother's shoulder. "But Mom, I don't want to go shopping with Grandma this weekend. Can we maybe do something together instead? Just us?" Before Delaney could respond, the front door opened. Barrett stood there, still in his TV appearance suit, his face a mix of triumph and apprehension. "I guess you saw the news?" "Congratulations," Delaney said carefully, aware of Skylar's presence. "The Carmichaels clearly saw the value in your work. Dad, you were great on TV." Skylar's enthusiasm seemed to ease some of the tension in Barrett's shoulders. "Thanks, Princess." He smiled at their daughter before turning back to Delaney. "Can we talk? In private?" In the kitchen, Barrett loosened his tie, looking more uncertain than he had on television. "The Carmichaels called late last night. They wanted to move forward immediately, show a united front." Mom thought, "Of course she did." Delaney's voice was quiet but firm. "She orchestrated this whole thing, didn't she? Turned the confrontation at the benefit into a triumph for the family name?" "It's not like that, Del. This deal, it changes everything for the firm. We're talking about expansion, new offices, a whole new level of clients." "And what about us, Barrett? What about our family?" Delaney gestured toward the living room, where Skylar was presumably trying to eavesdrop. "Your mother called our daughter this morning, trying to manipulate her understanding of what's happening. She's 12 years old, Barrett. She shouldn't be drawn into these games." Barrett's face darkened. "Mom wouldn't." "She would, and she did. Just like she's been doing since the day we got married." Delaney took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I need you to listen to me. Really listen. I'm proud of your success. I've supported your dreams from the beginning. But I won't let Eleanor use that success to drive wedges between us or to influence our daughter's understanding of family loyalty." Something shifted in Barrett's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. He moved to the window, looking out at the Denver skyline that had witnessed so much of their story. "I talked to Richard Carmichael about you, you know, after you left the benefit. Told him how you supported me when I lost everything, how you kept our family strong while I rebuilt." "You did?" The admission caught Delaney off guard. He said it reminded him of his own wife in their early days. Before the money, before the social circles. Said any man who forgets those who stood by him in hard times doesn't deserve the success he achieves. Barrett turned back to face her. "I've been forgetting, haven't I?" The question hung between them, heavy with years of accumulated choices and silences. From the living room came the sound of Skylar's favorite show, a reminder of the innocent lives affected by their adult complications. "It's not too late to remember," Delaney said softly. "But Barrett, things have to change. Real change, not just words or temporary adjustments to keep the peace." Barrett nodded slowly, then reached for his phone. "I need to make a call." He hesitated, then added, "To Mom. This ends now." Eleanor Callahan's penthouse apartment occupied the top floor of one of Denver's most prestigious buildings, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the mountains. Barrett sat rigidly on an antique settee, his mother's favorite tea service laid out before them, untouched. "Really, Barrett, I don't understand why this couldn't wait until after the press coverage dies down," Eleanor said, arranging herself gracefully in her chair. "The Carmichael deal is delicate enough without adding family drama. That's exactly why we need to have this conversation now." Barrett's voice carried a firmness that surprised even him. "Mom, we need to talk about your relationship with Delaney and with Skylar." Eleanor's perfectly manicured hand paused midway to her teacup. "I assume this is about Delaney's unfortunate display at the benefit. I've already spoken to Victoria Carmichael, smoothed things over, no lasting damage done. The unfortunate display was 15 years in the making," Barrett said quietly, "and it's my fault for letting it happen. For standing by while you undermined my wife, criticized her parenting, and tried to mold our family into your image of what we should be. Everything I've done has been for you, for this family's future." Eleanor's voice took on the wounded tone she'd perfected over years of getting her way. "The connections I've cultivated, The opportunities I've created have come at a price. Barrett stood, moving to the window. The city stretched below them, reminding him of all the times he'd watched Delaney navigate this world that had never quite accepted her. Do you know what Richard Carmichael said to me yesterday? He said he admired how Delaney stood by me when I lost everything. Said it showed character, hers and mine, for recognizing her worth. Eleanor's face tightened almost imperceptibly. The Carmichaels are romantics at heart. But business is about more than social connections and power plays. Barrett turned to face his mother. It's about trust, loyalty, building something real. Delaney understood that when she supported my dreams, worked extra hours to pay our bills, raised our daughter while I was consumed with starting over. And now you have everything you wanted, Eleanor pressed. The successful firm, the Carmichael partnership, respect in the business community. But at what cost, Mom? My wife feels like an outsider in her own family. My daughter is being taught that social status matters more than character. And I've been too focused on success to see what really matters. A long silence filled the elegant room. Eleanor studied her son's face, perhaps seeing for the first time the man he'd become rather than the son she'd tried to shape. You're serious about this, she said finally. You're choosing her side. There shouldn't be sides, Mom. We're family. All of us. But if you force me to choose, yes, I choose my wife and daughter every time. And what about the social obligations, the connections we've built, Skylar's future in this community? Barrett's phone buzzed with a text, a photo from Delaney. Skylar grinning from her spot on the couch, surrounded by get-well cards from her volleyball team. The simple joy in his daughter's face struck him like a physical force. Skylar's future will be whatever she wants it to be, he said firmly. And Delaney and I will support her choices, not force her into a mold that doesn't fit, just like I should have supported Delaney all these years. Eleanor rose, moving to stand beside him at the window. For a moment they both watched the city below, where people lived their lives unburdened by the weight of social expectations and family legacies. You really love her, don't you? Eleanor's voice was softer now, tinged with something like recognition. After all these years, it's still the same girl who made you laugh at that charity auction, who didn't know the difference between Bordeaux and Burgundy. I do. Barrett smiled slightly at the memory. And Mom, she loves me too. Enough to stand by me when I had nothing but dreams and determination. Enough to face down the society circles you value so much to defend our family. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the window pane. I supposed I've been set in my ways, perhaps too focused on appearances, on what others might think. She turned to face her son. It won't be easy for me to change, Barrett. Years of habits, of expectations. I'm not asking for an overnight transformation. Just try. Get to know Delaney as she is, not as you think she should be. See how she's raised Skylar to be strong and independent. Understand that our family's strength comes from love and support, not social connections. As if on cue, his phone buzzed again. Another text from Delaney. Skylar's asking for her dad, and maybe her grandmother if she's not too busy. Barrett showed the message to Eleanor, watching as something shifted in his mother's expression. She still wants me there? After everything? That's who Delaney is, Mom. That's who she's always been. The question is, who do you want to be in our family's story? The weekend arrived with an unusual tension in the Whittaker household. Skylar sat at the kitchen island, her injured ankle propped on a stool, watching as her mother prepared breakfast. The familiar weekend routine felt different somehow, charged with anticipation. Are you sure about this, honey? Delaney asked, sliding a plate of pancakes toward her daughter. We could still do something just us today. I'm sure, Mom. Skylar's voice carried a certainty beyond her years. Besides, Dad said Grandma Eleanor actually asked to come. That's different, right? Before Delaney could respond, the doorbell rang. Barrett appeared from his office, catching Delaney's eye with a reassuring nod before opening the door. Eleanor stood there, looking uncharacteristically uncertain, holding a large gift bag and wearing casual clothes. A sight so unexpected, it made Delaney pause. I brought some things for our day in, Eleanor announced, her usual commanding tone softened slightly. Board games from when Barrett was young and some old photo albums I thought Skylar might enjoy. The moment felt fragile, like blown glass that could shatter with the slightest misstep. Delaney took a deep breath, remembering Barrett's words from the night before. Give her a chance to show she can change. Would you like some coffee, Eleanor? Delaney offered, gesturing to their expensive machine, the one Eleanor had gifted them. I actually learned some new brewing techniques from that barista course you recommended last Christmas. A flicker of surprise crossed Eleanor's face. I'd love some, she said, moving to set her bags down. And perhaps you could show me those techniques. I've always been curious about proper coffee preparation. Skylar watched this exchange with keen interest, her eyes moving between her mother and grandmother as if witnessing a particularly intense volleyball match. Barrett, sensing the delicate balance, cleared his throat. Why don't we set up in the living room? Skylar needs to keep that ankle elevated anyway. The morning unfolded in unexpected ways. Eleanor, freed from the constraints of her usual social performance, revealed a different side of herself. As they looked through photo albums, she shared stories about Barrett's childhood, not the usual polished anecdotes about his achievements, but real human moments. Oh, this one, Eleanor laughed, pointing to a photo of a young Barrett covered in mud. This was after he decided to search for dinosaur bones in the backyard. He was convinced our garden was an archaeological site. Dad? Really? Skylar giggled, leaning closer to see. Did you find any dinosaurs? Just your grandmother's prized tulip bulbs, Barrett grinned. I don't think I sat comfortably for a week after that. Those tulips won first prize at the garden club every year, Eleanor sighed, but her tone was more nostalgic than reproachful. She turned to Delaney. You know I never told you this, but the way you've encouraged Skylar's volleyball, it reminds me of how I used to support Barrett's wild schemes. Before social expectations became more important, Delaney suggested gently. Eleanor's hands stilled on the photo album. Yes, I suppose so. Sometimes we get so caught up in building the life we think our children should have, we forget to see the life they're actually living. A comfortable silence fell over the room, broken only by the sound of Skylar flipping through pages. Then Eleanor spoke again, her voice carrying an unfamiliar note of vulnerability. I found something else while looking through old things. She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn leather album. These are from my early days with Barrett's father. The photos showed a younger Eleanor, laughing on a camping trip, hair windblown and clothes distinctly unglamorous. James came from old money, but he loved adventure. These were taken before we got caught up in society obligations, before I started believing that status was the most important thing we could give our son. Delaney studied the images, seeing echoes of the woman who had stood up to social pressure to marry for love, who had once valued experiences over appearances. What changed? She asked softly. Eleanor traced the edge of a photo showing her and James dancing at what looked like a casual outdoor party. After James fell ill, I became obsessed with securing Barrett's future. Social connections, business opportunities, they became my way of trying to control an uncontrollable world. She looked up at Delaney. I see now that I've been doing the same thing to you and Skylar. Mom, Barrett started, but Eleanor held up a hand. Let me finish, dear. Delaney, when you stood up to me at the benefit, you reminded me of myself, the woman I used to be, before I let fear dictate my choices. When you chose to leave that event to be with Skylar, you showed more strength than I ever did with my endless social maneuvering. Skylar, who had been quietly observing, suddenly spoke up. Is that why you're different today, Grandma? Because Mom reminded you of you? Eleanor smiled, reaching out to squeeze her granddaughter's hand. You're very perceptive, darling. Yes, I suppose that's part of it. And seeing these old photos, remembering who I used to be. It made me realize I've been trying to perfect a life that was never meant to be perfect. Nothing's perfect, Delaney said, meeting Eleanor's eyes. But maybe that's not what family should be about. No, Eleanor agreed softly. Perhaps it should be about acceptance, about supporting each other's dreams, even when those dreams don't match our own expectations. Barrett moved to sit beside his wife, their shoulders touching. Like when someone supports you through starting over, even when everyone else thinks you're crazy. Exactly like that. Eleanor nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Delaney, I owe you an apology. Many apologies, actually. But perhaps we could start with me learning who you really are, not who I thought you should be. Monday morning dawned bright and clear over Denver, the city skyline crisp against the blue Colorado sky. Delaney sat in her office at Mile High Reality, reviewing listings while her conversation with Caroline played out on speakerphone. "Let me get this straight," Caroline said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Eleanor Callahan spent the entire weekend at your house, looking at old photos and playing board games. The same Eleanor who once said Monopoly was beneath people of our station? She even ordered pizza for dinner," Delaney replied, smiling at the memory of Eleanor daintily blotting grease from her slice with a paper napkin. "Caroline, it was like seeing a completely different person emerge. People don't change overnight, Del, especially not people like Eleanor. Maybe they do when they're reminded of who they used to be." Delaney paused, considering. "You should have seen her with Skylar, sharing stories about Barrett's childhood. Real stories, not the polished society versions she usually tells." A knock at her office door interrupted the conversation. Victoria Carmichael stood in the doorway, looking every bit as elegant as she had at the benefit, but with a different kind of energy about her. "Caroline, I'll call you back," Delaney said quickly, ending the call. "Mrs. Carmichael, what a surprise. Please call me Victoria." She entered the office, glancing around with apparent interest. "Eleanor mentioned you had become quite successful in real estate. I'm actually here about that in a way." Delaney gestured to a chair, her professional mask sliding into place. "How can I help you?" "Richard and I are looking to diversify our real estate portfolio," Victoria said, settling into the chair. "We've heard excellent things about your work, particularly your ability to spot promising properties before they hit the market." "That's very kind, but surely you have established relationships with other agents." "We do," Victoria interrupted smoothly. "But Eleanor shared something interesting at our lunch yesterday. She told us how you supported Barrett during his career transition, how you balanced work and family while he built his business." She paused, meeting Delaney's eyes directly. "That kind of determination and loyalty, it's rare in our circles." Delaney felt herself flush, remembering her outburst at the benefit. "About the other night. Was refreshing," Victoria finished. "Do you know how long it's been since someone spoke honest truth at one of those events?" "Richard hasn't stopped talking about it. He said it reminded him of me back when we were starting out." The conversation shifted into business discussion, but with an underlying current of genuine connection that Delaney had never expected from Victoria Carmichael. As they reviewed potential properties, Victoria shared stories about her own early days in Denver's business community, the challenges she'd faced, the compromises she'd made. Later that afternoon, Delaney arrived home to find Barrett and Skylar in the kitchen, attempting to recreate Eleanor's famous chocolate cake recipe, with questionable success, judging by the flour coating every surface. "Mom!" Skylar called from her perch on a kitchen stool, her ankle still propped up. "Dad's trying to bake. Grandma gave us her secret recipe, but I think we're doing it wrong." Barrett turned, revealing a streak of chocolate across his cheek. "In my defense, Mom never let me help with baking when I was growing up. Something about maintaining standards." "Speaking of your mother," Delaney said, dropping her bags and rolling up her sleeves. "You'll never guess who came to my office today." As she shared the story of Victoria's visit, helping Barrett salvage what they could of the cake, Delaney felt a profound shift in the air around them. It wasn't just Eleanor who was changing. They all were finding new ways to bridge the gaps that had grown between them. "Dad," Skylar said suddenly, "remember what Grandma said yesterday? About how sometimes the best things in life happen when we stop trying to make everything perfect?" Barrett nodded, attempting to smooth the cake's lumpy frosting. "I think she was right. Look at this cake. Definitely not perfect, but we made it together. And that makes it better than perfect," Delaney added, snapping a photo of their creation. She sent it to Eleanor with the caption, "Family Baking Adventure. Not quite up to your standards, but made with love." The response came quickly. "Save me a slice. I'll bring coffee tomorrow, and maybe we can work on those baking skills together." Delaney showed the message to Barrett, who wrapped an arm around her waist. "You know," he said softly, "I think Mom's finally realizing that the best family recipes aren't about perfect measurements and proper techniques. They're about the memories we make while creating them," Delaney finished, leaning into his embrace as Skylar documented their disastrous but joy-filled baking attempt for her social media. The cake might have been lopsided, the kitchen might have been a mess, but in that moment, everything felt exactly as it should be, imperfect, real, and filled with promise for the future. 2 weeks had passed since the weekend that changed everything, and autumn was painting Denver in vibrant shades of gold and red. Delaney stood in front of Bradford Academy, watching as students streamed out of the building. Skylar emerged last, walking normally now, deep in conversation with Eleanor, who had apparently made it her mission to attend every one of her granddaughter's volleyball practices. "Mom, Grandma's going to help me with my history project," Skylar called out, her face bright with excitement. "She actually lived through some of the events we're studying." "Thank you for that reminder of my age, darling," Eleanor chuckled, adjusting her casual blazer, a far cry from her usual formal attire. "Delaney, I hope you don't mind. I know Tuesday afternoons are usually your time with Skylar." "Of course not," Delaney smiled, recognizing the careful way Eleanor now tried to respect boundaries while building new connections. "Actually, I could use your help with something else if you have time after the history lesson." Eleanor's eyes lit up with surprise and interest. "I'd be delighted." Later that afternoon, they sat in Delaney's office at Mile High Reality, reviewing the Carmichael portfolio. Victoria had entrusted Delaney with finding properties for their new investment initiative, and Eleanor's insights into the city's development plans were proving invaluable. "The Henderson district is transforming faster than anyone anticipated," Eleanor mused, studying a map. "But you'll want to look here, along the river. The city council's planning a revival project that hasn't been announced yet." "How do you know these things?" Delaney asked, marking the area Eleanor indicated. "Years of charity board meetings," Eleanor smiled wryly. "All that social networking I pushed so hard. It does have its practical uses." She paused, her expression growing serious. "Delaney, I owe you an apology for how I used to view your career. I saw it as beneath our family's status. I never appreciated the skill and intelligence it requires." "Water under the bridge," Delaney assured her, but Eleanor shook her head. "No, these things need to be said. I spent years trying to mold you into something you never needed to become, when you were already extraordinary in your own right." She gestured at the office around them. "You built this while supporting Barrett's dreams, raising Skylar, and tolerating my constant criticism. That takes remarkable strength." Their conversation was interrupted by Barrett's arrival, his face tense despite his attempt at a smile. "Sorry to interrupt, but we need to talk." He closed the office door behind him. "The Carmichael deal, there's been a complication." Delaney felt her stomach tighten. "What kind of complication?" "They want to restructure the partnership. Instead of maintaining our independence, they're proposing a full acquisition of Whitaker Consulting." Barrett ran a hand through his hair, his tell for deep stress. "It would mean more resources, bigger projects, but you'd be working for them instead of with them," Delaney finished, understanding immediately why this troubled him. "Exactly. Everything I've built, everything we sacrificed for, it would become part of their corporate empire." He looked at his mother, tension evident in his stance. "Mum, I know you've worked hard to make this partnership happen." "Stop right there," Eleanor interrupted, rising from her chair. "Barrett, look at me. What do you want to do?" What?" "It's a simple question. Forget about the Carmichaels, forget about social implications, forget about what you think you should do. What do you want?" Barrett glanced at Delaney, then back at his mother. "I want to keep building something of my own, something I can be proud of, something that reflects my values, not just my business acumen." Eleanor nodded decisively. "Then that's what you'll do. The Carmichaels are shrewd business people, but they're not the only path to success." She turned to Delaney. "Your wife has taught me something important about that." "Mom," Barrett said softly, "this could affect our standing in certain circles, the very circles you've spent years helping us navigate." "Oh, darling," Eleanor laughed, the sound surprisingly warm. "Haven't you noticed? Those circles have been changing too. Look at Victoria Carmichael, partnering with Delaney on real estate ventures. Look at how the benefit committee responded to Delaney's honesty. Sometimes standing your ground earns more respect than simply fitting in." Delaney watched this exchange with growing amazement. The Eleanor of a month ago would have pushed for the acquisition, seeing only the prestige and social advancement it offered. This new Eleanor, however, seemed to understand something deeper about success and fulfillment. "You know," Delaney said thoughtfully, "the Hendersons are looking to diversify their investment portfolio. They've always preferred working with independent firms, especially local ones with proven track records." Eleanor's eyes sparkled with interest. "The Hendersons? Margaret Henderson and I serve on the symphony board together. She mentioned something about their new business direction. As Eleanor and Delaney began brainstorming alternatives, Barrett watched them with a mixture of amusement and gratitude. His phone buzzed, a text from Skylar. "Done with homework? Where is everyone? Grandma promised to teach me her secret chocolate cake recipe for real this time." Speaking of independent ventures, Barrett smiled, showing them the message. "We have a baking lesson to attend." "Oh dear," Eleanor stood, gathering her things. "We should hurry. That kitchen of yours needs proper supervision when baking is involved." As they drove home together, Delaney glanced at Barrett. "Are you really okay with turning down the Carmichael offer? You know what's strange? For the first time, I feel completely confident about it. Mom's right. Success isn't about following someone else's path. It's about being true to your own vision." He reached for her hand. "You taught me that, you know. Every time you stood by me. Every time you believed in my dreams." "Even when those dreams covered our kitchen in flour?" Delaney teased. "Especially then," Barrett laughed. "Although I think Mum's baking supervision might be a good idea. I'm pretty sure that cake we made violated several culinary laws." The Denver Art Museum's annual gala was in full swing, the modern architecture providing a stunning backdrop for the city's elite. But this year, something was different. Eleanor Callahan stood with her son and daughter-in-law watching as Skylar charmed a group of board members with her enthusiastic description of her history project on Denver's architectural evolution. "She's a natural," Victoria Carmichael observed, joining their group. "Though I suspect she gets that confidence from both sides of the family." Eleanor smiled, remembering her initial resistance to Skylar's public speaking style, which she'd once considered too informal for their social circle. Now she saw it for what it was, genuine enthusiasm and intelligence, unencumbered by artificial constraints. "Richard and I were disappointed about the acquisition falling through," Victoria continued, "but we've been impressed with how Barrett handled everything. It takes courage to choose your own path." "Sometimes the best business decisions aren't about business at all," Eleanor replied, surprising herself with the words. She caught Delaney's eye and added, "Sometimes they're about preserving what matters most." Across the room, Margaret Henderson was deep in conversation with Barrett, their animated discussions suggesting positive developments for Whitaker Consulting's new direction. The Henderson partnership was taking shape, offering opportunities that aligned perfectly with Barrett's vision for his company. "Mom," Skylar appeared at Eleanor's elbow, "can you tell Mrs. Carmichael about the secret ingredient in our chocolate cake, the one we made for Dad's office party?" "Ah, but then it wouldn't be a secret anymore, would it?" Eleanor wrapped an arm around her granddaughter's shoulders. "Although I suppose we could invite Victoria to our next baking session. Your mother's kitchen has become quite the gathering place." "Speaking of gathering places," Delaney joined the conversation, "Barrett and I have been thinking about hosting regular family dinners. Not formal affairs, just casual get-togethers. Would you be interested, Victoria? Your family would be welcome too." Victoria's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Richard would love that. He's been talking about wanting more connection with people beyond business settings." She glanced around the elegant gala. "Events like this are lovely, but they don't feed the soul quite like a home-cooked meal shared with friends." Eleanor felt a familiar pang of regret, remembering all the years she'd prioritized formal social occasions over simple family moments. But the feeling was tempered by gratitude for the changes in their lives, for the second chances they'd all been given. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I found some more old photos the other day, from when Barrett was in high school, running that ridiculous lawn mowing business." "Mom," Barrett groaned, joining them. "Not the lawn mowing stories." "Oh, but darling, they're such good stories." Eleanor's eyes twinkled. "Like the time you tried to impress the Hendersons' daughter by offering to landscape their entire estate, having no idea what landscaping actually involved. That's where you got your entrepreneurial spirit?" Delaney asked, delighted by this new piece of family history. "More like where I learned the importance of thorough business planning," Barrett laughed. "And where Mom learned the value of letting me make my own mistakes." "Some lessons take longer to learn than others," Eleanor acknowledged softly. "But they're worth learning, no matter how long it takes." Skylar, who had been listening intently, suddenly straightened. "The orchestra's starting. Dad, you promised we could dance. You too, Grandma. You said you'd show me how you won that dance competition in college." "Did I?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. I don't recall mentioning my brief foray into competitive dancing. It was in one of the old albums, Skylar said triumphantly, the one with pictures of you and Grandpa at that festival. You looked so happy, just dancing and not caring what anyone thought. Something shifted in Eleanor's expression, a mixture of joy and nostalgia that made her look years younger. Well then, my dear, let's show them how it's done. As Eleanor led Skylar to the dance floor, Delaney leaned against Barrett's shoulder. Your mother competing in dance contests. Who would have thought? There's a lot about Mom we never knew, Barrett mused. Or maybe forgot when life got complicated with social expectations and family traditions. Speaking of traditions, Delaney smiled. Skylar wants to start a new one. Sunday morning pancakes, but everyone has to help cook. Even Eleanor. Even Eleanor, Victoria laughed. Now that I'd like to see. You're welcome to join us, Delaney offered. Fair warning though, our kitchen tends to get a bit chaotic. The best kitchens always do, Victoria said warmly. Richard and I would love to come. On the dance floor, Eleanor was teaching Skylar a simple waltz, their laughter carrying over the orchestra's music. Around them, other guests were abandoning their usual formal restraint, drawn into the infectious joy of the moment. You know what this reminds me of? Barrett asked softly, pulling Delaney close as they watched their daughter and his mother dance. That charity auction where we met. Remember how you made me laugh during that terribly stuffy presentation? And scandalized half the room, Delaney recalled. Including your mother. Now look at her. Barrett nodded toward Eleanor, who was now attempting to teach Skylar a more complicated step. I think she finally remembers what it's like to live without worrying about everyone else's expectations. Sometimes, Delaney said thoughtfully, it takes seeing ourselves through someone else's eyes to remember who we really are. As the evening continued, the formal gala transformed into something warmer, more genuine. Eleanor's laughter mingled with Skylar's. Victoria and Richard joined the dancing, and conversations shifted from business and social obligations to real connection and shared stories. In that moment, watching their family and friends truly enjoying themselves, Delaney realized that sometimes the greatest victories aren't about changing others, but about creating space for everyone to be their authentic selves. Even in Denver's high society, even in the most traditional families, there was room for real love, genuine connection, and the joy of simply being together. Spring had returned to Denver, bringing with it new beginnings and unexpected opportunities. The Henderson partnership had exceeded all expectations, allowing Barrett to expand Whitaker Consulting while maintaining his independence. But today, business was far from everyone's minds as they gathered in the Whitakers' backyard for a very special celebration. Skylar's 13th birthday party was in full swing, but it barely resembled the formal affairs Eleanor used to insist upon. Instead of crystal champagne flutes and classical quartet music, the yard was filled with volleyball nets, laughing teenagers, and the kind of joyful chaos that comes with genuine celebration. Eleanor, wearing jeans and a casual blouse, an outfit that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago, was teaching Skylar's friends how to serve properly. Her competitive spirit, once channeled into social climbing, now found expression in coaching the next generation of athletes. "Mom," Barrett called from the grill where he was attempting to manage an impressive array of burgers and hot dogs. "A little help here?" "Coming, dear," Eleanor laughed, jogging over with the same enthusiasm she now brought to their weekly family dinners. Though I'm not sure my country club cooking classes covered proper hot dog grilling techniques, Delaney watched from the patio where she was arranging food with Victoria Carmichael. The two women had developed a genuine friendship that extended far beyond their business relationship. Victoria's own teenage daughters were among the party guests, fitting in seamlessly with Skylar's friends from both Bradford Academy and her volleyball team. "I never thought I'd see Eleanor Callahan in blue jeans," Victoria mused, arranging a plate of vegetables. "But somehow they suit her better than all those designer outfits." "Everything suits her better these days," Delaney agreed. "It's like she's finally comfortable in her own skin." The sound of cars parking out front announced the arrival of more guests. Margaret Henderson appeared with her family, followed by Caroline and several other friends who had become regular fixtures at the Whitakers' weekend gatherings. The traditional social barriers that had once seemed so important had given way to genuine connections. "Mom," Skylar called out, running over with her friends in tow. "Can we show them the video from last week's game?" The one where Grandma got so excited she almost fell off the bleachers? Eleanor groaned good-naturedly. Must we share that particular moment? I was simply enthusiastic about your winning serve. That's what makes it perfect, Skylar grinned, hugging her grandmother. You're so much more fun when you're just being yourself. The simple observation caught Eleanor off guard. She looked around the yard, taking in the scene. Barrett laughing as he burned another hot dog. Delaney and Victoria sharing stories over salad preparation, the mix of children from different social backgrounds playing together without a thought to status or privilege. You know, Eleanor said softly to Delaney as the teenagers rushed off to watch the video. I spent so many years trying to create the perfect life for our family, all those rules, all those expectations, and here we are, finding real happiness in the most wonderfully imperfect moments. Life has a way of teaching us what really matters, Delaney replied, squeezing Eleanor's hand. Sometimes it just takes us a while to learn the lesson. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard as the party continued. Richard Carmichael and Barrett were deep in conversation about their latest joint venture, a community development project that combined Barrett's innovative approach with the Carmichaels' resources. It was a partnership of equals now, built on mutual respect rather than social obligation. Delaney, Eleanor called, waving her over to where she stood with Margaret Henderson. Margaret was just telling me about an interesting property near the old theatre district. It's not officially on the market yet, but as Delaney joined them, she marveled at how naturally Eleanor now moved between her role as grandmother, mother, and business ally. The rigid social protocols that had once governed their interactions had been replaced by genuine interest and respect. Actually, Margaret said, we were thinking this might be perfect for that youth sports initiative you mentioned. The one Skylar's been talking about? Delaney's eyes widened. Skylar had been dreaming about creating a place where kids from all backgrounds could play volleyball, regardless of their ability to pay for expensive club memberships. It was exactly the kind of project that the old Eleanor would have dismissed as impractical and beneath their social station. What do you think, Mom? Skylar asked, appearing suddenly at Eleanor's side, her face flushed from playing. Could we really do it? Eleanor looked at her granddaughter, seeing in her the perfect blend of Barrett's determination and Delaney's compassion. Darling, with this family behind you, I think you could do anything. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the yard, Barrett called everyone together for cake. It wasn't the elaborate professional creation Eleanor would have once insisted upon, but rather a slightly lopsided chocolate masterpiece that grandmother and granddaughter had made together that morning. Looking around at their gathered friends and family, the Carmichaels, the Hendersons, Caroline, and all the others who had become part of their extended family, Delaney felt a profound sense of rightness. They had created something far more valuable than social status or business success. They had built a community based on genuine connections and shared values. Make a wish, sweetheart, Barrett said, as Skylar prepared to blow out her candles. Skylar paused, looking around at her family. I don't need to, she said simply. Everything I could wish for is already here. 1 year had passed since the confrontation at the country club, benefit that had changed everything. The Denver summer evening was perfect, as the Whitakers prepared for their now traditional Sunday family dinner. The kitchen island was covered with ingredients, as Eleanor taught Skylar the finer points of French cuisine, a far cry from their first disastrous baking attempts. The secret, Eleanor explained, demonstrating the proper way to fold ingredients, is patience. Something I wish I'd learned many years ago, and not just in cooking. Delaney watched from the doorway, remembering all the times this kitchen had been a battlefield of silent tension and unspoken criticism. Now it was the heart of their home, filled with laughter and the kind of honest conversations that had once seemed impossible. Mom? Skylar called out, her hands covered in flour. Did you show Grandma the plans for the Youth Sports Center? The architect finished the preliminary drawings. The project had evolved from Skylar's dream into a reality, combining Whitaker Consulting's business acumen, the Carmichaels' resources, and Eleanor's surprising talent for community organizing. The old theater building would soon become a place where children from all backgrounds could discover their athletic potential. I was thinking, Eleanor said, carefully measuring spices, about naming it after your grandfather. James always believed in giving everyone a fair chance, even if I lost sight of that for a while. Barrett appeared from his home office. where he'd been finalizing details for Whitaker Consulting's latest expansion. The company had grown significantly over the past year, but in a direction that prioritized community impact alongside profit margins. "That's perfect, Mom," he said, stealing a taste of the sauce Eleanor was preparing. Dad would have loved seeing his name on something that brings people together instead of keeping them apart. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of their dinner guests. The Sunday gatherings had become a cherished tradition, rotating between homes but always maintaining the same spirit of warmth and acceptance that had begun in this kitchen. Victoria and Richard Carmichael entered first, their daughters chattering excitedly with Skylar about the upcoming volleyball season. Margaret Henderson followed with her family, carrying a bottle of wine and stories about their latest community project. Caroline arrived with her new boyfriend, who had quickly adapted to the group's informal dynamic. As everyone settled into their familiar routine, some helping with dinner preparation, others engaging in animated conversations about business and family, Delaney found herself standing in the same spot where she had once felt like an outsider in her own home. "Penny for your thoughts?" Eleanor appeared beside her, wiping her hands on an apron that would have once been beneath her dignity to wear. "Just thinking about how much has changed," Delaney replied. "A year ago, I never would have imagined us here like this." Eleanor nodded, watching as Skylar demonstrated her improved volleyball serve to Victoria's daughters in the living room, the furniture hastily pushed aside to make space. "I was so focused on maintaining an image of perfection that I nearly lost the chance to experience real joy." "We all got caught up in it," Barrett joined them, wrapping an arm around Delaney's waist. "The social expectations, the business pressure, the need to prove ourselves." "And now?" Eleanor asked, though her smile suggested she already knew the answer. "Now we understand that real success isn't about social status or business achievements," Delaney said. "It's about building something meaningful together." The evening unfolded with the comfortable familiarity of a well-loved tradition. Dinner was served at the large table Barrett and Skylar had built together, slightly uneven, but perfect for gathering family and friends. Conversation flowed freely, punctuated by laughter and the kind of honest exchanges that had once been considered inappropriate in proper society. As dessert was being served, another of Eleanor and Skylar's culinary experiments, Richard Carmichael raised his glass. "To the Whitakers," he proposed, "who taught us all that the best connections aren't made in boardrooms or benefit galas, but around kitchen tables and volleyball courts." "And to second chances," Eleanor added softly, meeting Delaney's eyes across the table. "For teaching us that it's never too late to change, to grow, to become better versions of ourselves." Later, as their guests began to depart, Skylar found Delaney in the kitchen, helping Eleanor pack leftover food into containers, another tradition that would have once been delegated to household staff. "Mom," Skylar said thoughtfully, "remember when you used to worry about fitting in with Grandma's crowd? About being good enough for the Whitaker name?" Delaney exchanged glances with Eleanor, both women remembering the tensions and insecurities that had once defined their relationship. "I do, sweetheart. I'm glad you didn't fit in," Skylar declared, "because you showed everyone that being yourself is better than being what others expect you to be." Eleanor wrapped an arm around her granddaughter, tears glistening in her eyes. "Your mother taught us all that lesson, darling. And it's the most valuable legacy we could pass on to you." As the Denver night settled around their home, Delaney stood with Barrett on their balcony, watching the city lights twinkle against the mountain backdrop. Eleanor's voice drifted up from the kitchen, where she was teaching Skylar an old family song, not the proper classical pieces she'd once insisted upon, but a silly tune from her own childhood. "You know what I love most about our life now?" Barrett asked, pulling Delaney close. "What's that?" "That we're not trying to live up to anyone's expectations anymore. We're just living, loving, making mistakes, and growing together." Below them, Eleanor's laughter mingled with Skylar's as their song dissolved into giggles. The sound floated up into the night air, a testament to the truth that sometimes the greatest achievements in life come not from reaching for perfection, but from embracing the beautiful imperfection of real love and genuine connection.